Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we help you resolve your chronic fatigue, whether it's from long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome, so that you can get back to living your best life. So, really excited about today because we're going to be talking with my friend, Dr. Christina Bjorndal, all about how you can optimize your mental health. So, Christina has a long history of mental health issues. She is experienced with depression. She attempted suicide and survived 3 times, had anxiety, bulimia, bipolar disorder, type 1, which had several episodes of psychosis, in addition to having cancer. And so she draws on her clinical training in naturopathic medicine and her additional trainings in mind-body medicine when striving to address patient mental health concerns. She's overcome many mental health challenges and is a gifted speaker and best-selling author. She's recognized as a top naturopath to follow by 2 independent organizations, and she has created 2 courses, Moving Beyond the Mental Health Label and Supporting Clinicians to Support Their Patients. Dr. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So let's start off by kind of getting into a little bit of your story around the fact that you had fatigue and you had depression, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, really for me, things started to turn sideways when I was in high school, and I was an overachiever and striving to be the best in all aspects of my life. And then I went to university and I did the same thing, but I ended up hitting the wall, if you will, and being diagnosed with depression. And then shortly after that, I was prescribed medication, but that I found myself after a few months in a place I'd never been before, which was I wasn't sleeping and I was talking very quickly, and I spun into a delusional psychotic event, which was very shocking to me because I didn't know what was going on in my body. I was then diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. And what I did with that is pretty much put it in the corner and lived with a lot of shame around it and didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I kept marching through the world wearing this mask that I've got it all together, but really I was struggling on the inside. And so things really took a deeper turn for me. That now I'm working in the corporate world. I ended up climbing the corporate ladder quickly and reporting to a CEO. And then had a suicide attempt that left me in some very difficult health conditions with kidney failure. I was on dialysis. And so that was a real turning point for me because I was not happy that I was still here. And I had to figure out why I was and how to navigate my life in a different way than taking the psychotropic medications that I was taking. At that time, I was taking 5. And I don't mind taking medication if you get better. That should be a prerequisite to taking medication, that you improve. I was not improving. So basically, I ended up making a career change because I was tired of being sick and tired all the time. And it wasn't until I went to see a nutritionally oriented psychiatrist named Abraham Hoffer and a naturopathic doctor that I was able to bring some life into my spirit and really realize that there's more to life than feeling tired and sick all the time. So that's kind of the 57-year journey in a nutshell for you.
In a nutshell. Yeah, lots of ups and downs, it sounds like. And I love what you said about medications. Whatever you take, whether it's a medication or a supplement, it should be more than a band-aid, right? It should reverse the problem.
Yeah.
So, what did you find were some of the root causes of the challenges that you had?
Mhm. So one key thing for me to mention is that I am adopted. So I do think that from root cause perspective, we want to look at the 4 big picture areas that are within all of us, which is the physical level, the mental, emotional levels, and then the spiritual aspect. So for me, it's multifactorial because on the physical level, that includes your organs of detoxification and your hormones and your neurotransmitters and nutrition and sleep and movement. And none of those were in place for me. Like I would get a score of 0 out of 10 in every area of those, right? So it's really hard to navigate life when your tanks are empty on like all cylinders are firing at zero, right?
Mhm.
So, but that eventually, with working with Dr. Hoffer, the physical level was supported with supplementation. However, that isn't also going to necessarily solve the problem because nobody was asking me what I was eating.
Mhm.
So you can take a nutraceutical or a herbal medicine, or you can take a pharmaceutical, but those are all working on a similar level. The only difference is where they're derived and how they're made. So it's very important to get back to basics always. And I think as clinicians, we're quick to reach for our prescription pad, whether we're going to prescribe a pharmaceutical or nutraceutical or a botanical. And I'm not saying not to do that, but what I am saying is we also want to keep enforcing and encouraging people to get to the basics with the nutrition that they're eating, but also not just on nutrition. What about also the relationships that you have, right? Because you can have toxic relationships,
Mhm.
and that comes to that mental, emotional, spiritual piece of the puzzle too, is so looking at the whole house here, right? We have to look at the whole house from ceiling to attic to what's the foundation and how are people really living their lives?
So you talked about the physical.
Yeah.
And this is like lifestyle habits, it seems. You had sleep and movement and nutrition and all that. And
Yeah.
then mental, is this kind of like how we're thinking? Is this mindset? Is this how we problem solve? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So for me with my journey, it started on that physical level, right? So I replaced I replaced pharmaceuticals with botanicals and nutraceutical supplements, and I got better. But when I stopped taking those supplements, I ended up depressed again. And part of the reason was my nutrition was not sound. Okay, I was a vegetarian and there was no vegetables in my diet. So I was a vegetarian, right? And I wasn't eating any protein. And we all know that neurotransmitters are derived from essential amino acids. So, I wasn't giving myself the precursors to make these things myself. And so the other piece, so that's really important, is the mind, though. What's the nature of the thoughts that you're thinking? And I had a very strong inner critic inside my head that was constantly, for lack of a better word, bullying me into perfectionism, into being the best, into overachieving. And and that is, yeah, it's going to get you somewhere for sure. But how do you feel about yourself? And if you're working against yourself every step of the way, that is one strategy. But for me, it always left me feeling not good enough, right? One of my diagnoses I like to say is not good enough itis. That's what I struggled with. And so shifting that inner voice and becoming aware, first of all, it's all about a first step is always awareness and recognition. Like, what is the nature of the thoughts I'm thinking? Because 90% of your mind is run by the subconscious mind. And only when you can bring these thoughts into your conscious, present minded awareness, then from that place, you can create change. So for me, the tool that has helped me the most was an instruction from my naturopathic doctor, which we'll share today, which is called the 4 R's of working with problematic thoughts. We really need to bring awareness to what is the nature of what we're thinking? And the reason is your thoughts create neuropeptides. Neuropeptides affect the hormones that get produced. And then those hormones that get produced in turn affect how you feel. So we have a chicken and an egg problem here. So for me, it was, I really do think I struggled for probably 20 years longer than I needed to because I was really resistant to the idea of change your thoughts, change your life. But now that I'm on the other side, I can say to you, there's a lot of science and merit and truth to that statement.
Why do you think you were resistant?
Because I felt like people were implying that I was intentionally causing my own suffering.
Mm,
And I didn't buy into this idea of affirmations because I believed the negative statement. For example, we'll use the negative statement for me was, I am unworthy. So for me to turn around and say, I am worthy, well, that felt like spraying bologna, whipping cream on a pile of bologna. I believed the latter statement, which is, I am unworthy. But because of Candace Pert's work in psychoneuroimmunology, which is just a fancy word that means your thoughts affect your physiology, nowhere does it say you actually have to believe the thought you say. And that's where I was stuck because I believed the negative, right? So, and I felt like I was lying if I said the positive. But because of psychoneuroimmunology, it's this physiological cascade. And over time, actually, you do feel better. So I say to my patients, look, if you're like me and it's a struggle, is a struggle for you, then let's just go neutral. And the neutral statement to that example is I am. And you don't fill in the blank, just I am,
mm.
which is a very powerful statement.
Interesting. That is a neutral statement. I have a client right now who's really struggling with this very thing where he's like, I cannot say these affirmations. I cannot, do gratitudes or whatever because I'm not feeling it. And it is like it must be his integrity or something around, he can't lie. I'm like, just fake it till you make it. I was like, you don't have to believe it or anything. And it's just not something that he can do.
Mm. Yeah. So two things there. The word can't. Okay, that's a very disempowering word. In cognitive behavioral therapy and in Gestalt psychotherapy, we say that can't is and should are these are words that keep you stuck. So first I would bring awareness to that with him, that word, and replace it with will or won't. Those are conscious choices. I will or I won't do affirmations, or I will or I won't follow your instruction. And it's okay if you won't. But now we can break that down and take a look at, well, why won't you? What's really, because it's layers with people often. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we're not asking you to believe it, right? We're just asking you, or go neutral, like I said, just find something softer and neutral that you can. And I think if he understood this physiological cascade, like just to, right? Because at the end of the day, there's only two branches to your nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, or stressed or relaxed, or fear or love, bully or buddy. These are just, other words to hammer the point home. But when you're thinking thoughts that are based in criticism, you're leaving yourself in a sympathetic or stressed state, producing more cortisol, which then it perpetuates the problem. So, yeah.
Mhm. And is it hard work to identify those thoughts and to reverse them?
I think it Yes and no. I think that for myself and most of my patients, those thoughts are really running the forefront. They're really at the forefront of people. And they're right there on the edge. Most people are often wearing this mask, but the minute you might ask, do you have an inner critic, or what is the voice that's speaking to you on the inside that you're not willing to share always on the outside? And they give you an insight into that, then you know that they're walking around beating themselves up. And that comes from somewhere, whether it comes from our in utero experience. In my case, it comes from your childhood conditioning, comes from a coach, parent, teacher, friend, who knows? But it comes from somewhere. And the beautiful thing is, thoughts are not fixed entities, but we can change them, but we have to be able to be open and present and willing to be real and authentic with our doctor or our loved one or whoever it is that you feel safe. And that's the other key thing is we have to be able to feel safe to share these these things that are in the dark recesses that we don't really want anybody to know that we think, right? So I know for myself, if my doctor didn't specifically ask me if I had a plan to end my life, I wouldn't, I wasn't forthcoming with that information, right? And same with the bulimia. If they didn't ask me what was going on, I wasn't forthcoming with offering that information over, right? So as clinicians, we have to ask the right questions, number one. And number two, as patients, we have to give some help to our doctors because they can't read our minds, right? If you don't
Mhm.
ask the right question as a doctor and you don't offer the information up as a patient, then how are we going to help you, right?
And so is asking whether somebody has a plan, is that something that anybody can do? If somebody's concerned about somebody being suicidal, do they have to be a clinician or can they be a friend or a loved one or whatever and ask if somebody has a plan?
Well, I think if more people asked if people how people were doing and if they had a plan, then maybe our suicide rates wouldn't be so high because most people feel really alone, right? And I think most people now I can wear both hats here. So as a person who's attempted my life many times, I can tell you that even if you asked me, I might not have been honest with you,
Mm.
right? Because that's something that I'm intent on doing, and I know that you're going to try to stop me,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So it's really up to the individual to be honest with where they're at and their desire to be here, who's the person who's suffering. But then on the other hand, as the caregiver, the doctor, the friend, the parent, the colleague, what can happen on their end is they don't want to so we don't want to always take responsibility. If I ask this question and then they disclose that, yeah, well then now what am I supposed to do with that?
mhm,
Now I'm responsible for this person. And that's the biggest fear I hear often amongst clinicians is they're afraid to ask because they don't want to be sort of on the hook, if you will. And this is where the spiritual piece comes in because at the end of the day, this is really about your relationship and connection with spirit and God, really, ultimately. I mean, I'm not going to be so egotistical sitting in my chair thinking that I've got the control over your life. I don't. But what I do have control over is imparting into your heart from my heart that you're worthy and that you're lovely and loving and that your life is worth living and that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary situation
mm.
and that there's explanations for your suffering and will you hang on with me a little longer so we can figure this out? Because I guarantee you it's solvable. Guarantee you. And I think if we spoke to each other like that, then more people might feel that they're valued, you know?
So then that was very beautiful, by the way. I love the way you said that. Um, so how do you convey to somebody that life is worth living?
Part of it is asking them to share with you something that lights them up, whether it's a pet, whether it's I mean, this is dating myself because I'm not in this generation, but whether it's a video game, I mean, I don't know, right? That's so out of my realm to say because I'm like, okay, but for me, it's a pet or a person or, a grandparent or I guarantee you, no one is truly all alone.
Mhm.
Could even be a plant, right? But some other living thing, preferably, but it could be art. It doesn't, but there's got to be something that sparks the person. And I have yet to meet somebody who hasn't says they have nothing that sparks them.
So it seems like some of it is not necessarily is maybe not having access to that or not thinking about that or attaching onto that. So when they have that spark, then is it about cultivating more of that?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes. And finding meaning in the meaningless. because a lot of people feel like what is the point? Like really, what is the point?
Hmm.
You And I've asked that question to myself many times. What is the point? Like really? And I've come to the conclusion since I feel like again, I mentioned I'm an overachiever, right? And yet in this particular area, I've attempted a few times that I'm still here. So one could argue that I suck at that. Maybe that's a good thing, right? Or I'm slow learner. I'm not really sure, but I've had to reconcile why I am still here,
Hmm.
right? When other people are not. And what I've come to accept is that for me, the lesson that I'm here to learn is to learn how to love and accept myself and others and extend that love. Not only extending it to others, but also being able to receive it. Because when you grow up with the abandonment wound that I grew up with from being adopted, I grew up with this set of faulty beliefs that I wasn't wanted and I'm not good enough. And all of that wiring and imprinting, again, it caused me to be this overachiever, but at the same time, there was a huge price that I was paying because of those faulty beliefs that had to be eventually uncovered and looked at and addressed and changed, right? And so trauma is a big piece of the puzzle. Not one doctor in the 45 years that I was seeking help ever asked me about trauma. So it is a big piece. When you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, what was the root cause, right? And one of these root causes is for some people, it doesn't have to be adoption, but can be other trauma that happens. That imprints you and then you form beliefs. So it's not the story about the event. It's what beliefs did you form as a result of that experience?
Hmm.
That's the key for people.
Yeah, what's the
That's
meaning you gave the
yeah,
event?
meaning of the event that you made it mean for you. And that's where the medicine is, because when you can uncover that meaning and then take a look at it from this perspective, uh, when you've got 50 years or 20 years or however many years after that event, is that really true now?
Hmm.
Right? And so you can
So is,
step into your life. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say, is that where like the four R's come into play?
They do. Yeah. So the 4 R's, the first step is recognize. What is the nature of the thoughts that are happening here in your head, inside, that you're not speaking outside to people? And if you recognize that it is based in the inner critic or unkind or fearful or negative, whatever it is, then second R is refrain, stop. Can you refrain from following it? Because we follow these thoughts around and around and around. So can we interrupt that process? I'm not saying suppress. It's very important. I'm just saying, can we just let go of feeding it and fueling it? So that's refrain. Number three, we do so by relaxing into the breath. Most people are living right here from the neck up, and we're discounting our body. And when we breathe, most people are just breathing from the little bit top part of their lungs, but your lungs go all the way down to your diaphragm. And then your diaphragm, when you contract it, what's sitting underneath it on top of your kidneys is your adrenal gland, and your adrenal gland produces cortisol. So when you take a moment to pause and take that deep but diaphragmatic breath, you're actually physiologically giving your adrenal glands a little bit of love, and they don't have to you're no longer producing thinking thoughts. Ideally, you're looking at something in nature, giving your egoic mind a job to do. So we look at something in nature, we take 2 deep breaths, and then we come back to the moment. And then we step into the moment. So the fourth R is repeat steps 1, 2, and 3, recognize, refrain, relax. And then the fifth R is that rephrasing. So that's this. The 4 R's is sort of the tool to get you started, but then the fifth R is that rephrase that we talked about. Like, can we rephrase that statement from I am unworthy to something that's maybe just a little bit more supportive? And it doesn't have to be that big leap, like we said, like with your patient. Maybe it's just something that's a little just a millimeter shift, right? But that thought you're
Mhm.
thinking, that you're attached to thinking, isn't actually helping you heal. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that's the 4 R's. And that
I
was
love it.
very powerful for me because the first doctor that taught me that, was the first person that asked me, well, what are you thinking, Chris? What are you thinking? I'm like, wow, you really want to know what's going on inside here? He's like, yeah, I do. Right. I'm like, are you sure? Okay, here it comes. Get out your pen. Yeah, but you cannot.
That's,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's brilliant.
Mhm.
Um, that mindfulness to be able to stop and to recognize and to go through that process. And this is going to be linked below for people who are listening and watching this. You can download this for our process for free. Thank you for so much for providing that to us, Dr. Chris. So stepping in a little bit of a different direction. So why do you think that there's so much mental health now than ever before?
Oh boy. It's so interesting. I've been speaking for 20 years, and Dr. James Greenblatt is another nutritionally oriented psychiatrist, and he said that, and this is like 10 years ago, he said in 2030, which is only 6 years away, right? But back then it seemed like a long time ago, that a person is going to attempt suicide every second globally. Like that's like, okay, that's mind-boggling. And that was back then, and here we are 6 years away from that. And yeah, we're on target for that, which is so sad. So why do I think mental health conditions are on the rise? So starting just on that physical level, because I feel that just basically those 5 things that you mentioned at the outset, there's heavy metals, so chemicals. So from heavy metals, but also from plastics and from the food, from pesticides, in the products that we use. The environmental piece is so wide, vast, and large. And I can tell you, when I cleaned up my life from an environmental perspective, boy, my health just went up another notch. And I mean, I already was feeling dang good. And now I feel better at 57 than I've ever felt in my entire life, including from when I was 17. And most people say the opposite, right?
Mhm.
So, so, so many factors: the environment, our nutrition, our stress levels, our focus on, I think, the wrong thing, which is not the family, but money. That is also driving stress for people. The materialistic society that we live in is not helping our mental health, and placing our values in the wrong thing, that is also not helping our mental health. Our loss of connection with loved ones, our inability to communicate, navigate our emotions, navigate our thoughts. It's just so many things, and that we're disconnected. And community is another huge piece, and just learning how to communicate effectively as well. I was giving a talk for the Institute for Child Psychology here, and I came across this quote that said, "Your IQ will get you the job, but your EQ will keep you the job."
Mm.
And I felt like that was so true because in my case, I focused on intelligence. Again, top marks, getting the job, all that kind of thing, climbing the corporate ladder, but I was not emotionally intelligent at all. I did not know how to navigate my emotions, and God forbid I would have expressed them in a male dominated world. So, it was just, there's just so many things that affect us. And I think, but at the end of the day, I also see so much opportunity for healing and helping people. And I just wish that we were doing a better job, you know?
Well, and so how can someone improve their EQ or emotional quotient?
Well, first step is to figure out, what is your emotional quotient, right? And these are skills like resilience and purpose and grit and compassion, integrity, authenticity. So one of my colleagues, Jen Forstall, wrote a book called The Umbrella Effect, and she calls these skills the umbrella skills, and it's really important to be able to develop these. So she has a quiz that I use in my practice for. I give this to adults, but it's designed more for children. to help them. Because again, at school, the emphasis is often on the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, and not on relationships and getting along and solving conflict. Now,
Right.
again, I'm probably dating myself, right? Because it's been a long time since I graduated from high school, but I'm not sure if my son, he's just in first year university, and I, I still think the emphasis it's more so on those things that I just mentioned in terms of emotional intelligence, but I think we have a long ways to go still,
Hmm.
you know. Tolerance for each other's differences, seeking to understand each other from a place of curiosity, instead of wanting to win the conversation and be right, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get to intuition. I know that you talk quite a bit about this and having people learn to trust their heart and their intuition. How do you recommend people do this?
Yeah, so we could start if you're game, we can do a little exercise.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Your game? Okay. So just so people just to set the context, what I want people to understand is there's two voices that are often inside of you. So one is this voice from the egoic mind, from the head, if you will, and the other is this whisper from the heart, or some people might refer to it from the gut. We've heard the term gut instinct, right? And it comes down to how do we differentiate and navigate these two voices, which are sometimes at odds with each other. So, this exercise we're going to do, and if you're listening, you can do it along with us. So, we just start with placing your hands over your heart. And if it's comfortable for you, just to close your eyes, just to get the ego out of the way. If not, it's fine too. And we'll just take a breath here. So, just breathing in and then exhaling. And then I'm going to make a statement, and I just want you to repeat it, Evan, and then the answer that comes, and there's no right or wrong. And I'll take you through a few questions. So the first one is, heart, show me where you are.
Heart, show me where you are.
And then just share if there's anything that came to you. Could be color, word, nothing.
Um, I'm gonna do it again. Heart, show me where you are. I'm not experiencing anything yet.
Okay, that's no problem. Sometimes our hearts are shy. Okay, so the next one is to repeat after me, heart. Will you ever lie to me? Yes or no?
Heart, will you ever lie to me? Yes or no? I got a pretty good no.
Perfect. Heart, have I always followed you? Yes or no?
Heart, have I always followed you? Yes or no? Pretty strong no.
Okay. So, heart, how do you feel when you hear, I haven't always followed you?
So heart, how do you feel when you hear that I haven't always followed you? Sad.
Sad. So, we'll just take a breath there and just breathing into that sadness a bit. And we'll just ask, heart, why do you feel sad?
Heart, why do you feel sad? Because you're not listening to me.
Because you're not listening to me. Okay. So, heart, can you forgive me for not always following you? Yes or no?
So heart, can you forgive me for not always following you? Yes or no? Yes.
Perfect. And heart, is it possible that you are God, grace, my intuition, whatever word resonates with you there, dwelling within? Yes or no?
I got a yes, 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 yes.
Okay, perfect. There you go. That's it. That's the exercise. So here's how you use this exercise. So what's important to illustrate is those answers are right there. When we take a moment to be still All we took was one deep breath, closed our eyes to get kind of set the ego to the side a little bit. And then the heart was present, right? With those answers, you said quite quickly, no, yes, no, right? The answers so here's what we want to understand. First of all, is the quote, the heart must usher the mind into the zone of revelation by Joseph Campbell.
Mm.
Meaning we want to uh, lead our lives from the heart with asking the heart. It will guide you, right? The problem is that we get stuck in fear, which comes from the ego. So recognize that the ego is a busy place. It's busy throwing off opinions, comments, suggestions, ideas, criticisms, some of which are super helpful, some and others are not helpful. And when I was making my career change, I asked the same question for an entire year in my journal before I acted on the answer, which was the same answer all the time, which was if money didn't, or the question I asked was, if money didn't matter, what would I be doing with my life? The answer that always came was go back to school and become a naturopathic doctor. But then what do you think the next thing was? Right after that, immediately. Are you crazy? So heart said, go back to school. Ego, fear said, are you out of your mind? You can't do that. And then it would proceed to give me all the reasons why I needed to stay in my comfortable job. So it's about discern. So here's how you work with it, though. I'm not encouraging people to, just quit their jobs. I am encouraging you, though, to build your muscle here and build your intuitive skill with small little things like brown rice or quinoa, right? Chicken or beef. Or when I met Evan, bacon or more bacon, right? So it's like, just small things that there's nothing wrong if you counteract, if the heart says quinoa and then you decide to follow your egoic with egoic mind with the brown rice, nobody's going to be upset, right? Nothing bad's going to happen. But here's the thing, when you learn to trust this, then when you get big hits, like I should call my mom, or I don't think I should take that drink,
Mhm.
or you'll trust it, and it's a very powerful built-in surveillance system that we've all been given, but unfortunately many of us are just following the mind and the fear, and we don't trust this other whisper, and it's not going to yell and scream at you, it's just going to whisper at you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And sometimes the yelling and screaming comes in the form of symptoms, right?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So we've got just a couple minutes left. How do you work with people? You're obviously very good at this, and I recommend that people definitely check you out. How are you currently working with people?
I'm currently working with people in group format in terms, so I'm not taking one-on-one patients anymore. My practice is too full. And I've written a couple of books, so I would encourage people to check out Beyond the Label, which is the big book that I've written called that Beyond the Label 10 Steps to Improve Your Mental Health. The Essential Diet is another guidebook that you can use if you're wanting to just get started with the nutritional piece, because I really want to emphasize that that is important and it's crucial to get that right. And you can find me, in all the usual suspects, online, different spots, Instagram, Facebook. As you can see me rolling my eyes, I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I recognize that this is the way of the world. So here we are. And I think those are the best ways. I am writing a new book, so if you hop to my website, you can, stay informed by downloading the chapter of the other of Beyond the Label. There's a first chapter gift, or download this gift that we're giving today if you want to stay in touch.
Excellent. And we will drop all those links below. Well, Dr. Chris, it's been wonderful spending this time with you. I so appreciate all these juicy nuggets that you've dropped and that you shared with us today. I really hope that this helps people who are struggling right now with depression and suicidal thoughts to find the purpose, to find that spark, to find that spirituality, to address the four different pillars that you've discussed today. And I hope that they reach out to work with you if they feel so inclined.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
So. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening and have an amazing day.